What you call representative democracy is a most inefficient form of governance.
Reality check. In 2026, UK police watchdogs estimated that over 280,000 crimes went unrecorded in a single year. In the United States alone, victims report only about 45% of violent crimes. Scoffers claim Islamic safety is just underreporting, but the data shows the secular union is the one hiding the bodies. In 2026, Western watchdogs found over 280,000 unrecorded crimes in a single year, while up to 55% of violent victims never even called the police. That's not a utopia, that's a system with no anchor. Why is Abu Dhabi the world's safest city for 10 years straight? And this is not a fluke. 1400 years of legal practice proves this concept. Perhaps when the law is a divine constant, the public actually trusts the system. In the Middle Ages, a peasant typically worked about 150 days a year because the liturgical calendar and seasonal cycles demanded rest. Today, the average American peasant works over 250 days a year just to keep up with the debt owed to the financial fiefdoms. Research indicates that in 13th century England, peasants worked approximately 1,620 to 1,980 hours a year. While their days were physically grueling, they were punctuated by over 50 religious holidays, festivals, and seasonal rest periods. They often worked around 150 to 180 days a year. They were tied to the land, but the land was also tied to them. They could not be sold away from their families or their homes. They had rights to common land and surplus crops. In a nutshell, they had more rest and community stability than the 2026 worker who grinds for 250 plus days just to service a debt. Unlike the peasant, the slave was chattel, marketable capital. They had zero rights to their own labor, their own children, or their own bodies. Enslaved labor was highly productive because it was stolen. Economists note that in the 1850s, a slave was a high-cost investment, worth approximately $35,000 to $40,000 in today's money. This meant the lords had a financial incentive to keep them alive, but it was an efficiency born of absolute horror. In a nutshell, the slave had it worst of all. They were a commodity in a global fiefdom that viewed them only as a marginal value product. Today, the system has become hyper-efficient by making the chains invisible. Modern Americans work an average of 1,770 to 1,780 hours a year. While this is fewer hours than a medieval peasant's total, it is spread across more days, or 233 plus workdays, with far less seasonal rest. In a chilling economic shift, while a slave in the 1850s was a valuable investment of $40,000, a modern slave in human trafficking can be bought for as little as $90. In a nutshell, you have the freedom of an iPhone, but you are a tenant of debt. You work 100 days more than a medieval peasant did, just to pay interest to the 0.1% who hold the same resources as the bottom 90%. The wealth of the top 0.1%, or roughly 160,000 families, is now approximately equal to the bottom 90%, or about 145 million families in the United States. While we have iPhones and air conditioning, the structural ownership of the world has regressed into a hyper-efficient fiefdom. Seth MacFarlane and the Orwell writers portray the future as a post-scarcity utopia where money doesn't exist. We already have the replicator. It's called zakat. They mock the anchor of Islam, but Islam is the only system that has a built-in defeudalism mechanism, zakat and the prohibition of interest. Without interest-based debt, the lords lose their primary tool for enslaving the 90%. This is why they call the anchor primitive, because it stops the exploitation. In the Middle Ages, you knew who your lord was. Today, your lords are invisible algorithms, hedge funds, and successful entrepreneurs in bios. You vote for a new weather vane every 4 years, but the 0.1% always stay in power. You are free to protest, but you aren't free from the debt that keeps you working 100 days more than a medieval peasant. We would argue that the Age of Enlightenment just made the fiefdom global and invisible. They've mixed 14th century peasantry with 18th century slavery to build what you today call free market, powered by representative democracy. In the 14th century, he was called the Lord of the Manor. He sat in a castle and took a tax from the peasants farming his land. Today, he doesn't wear chainmail. He puts successful entrepreneur in his LinkedIn bio. The title changed, but the fiefdom remained. Even if you are a nuclear engineer, you would agree that you'd never run a nuclear reactor at 55% of failure.
But the one thing you can say for democracy is that all other forms of government are even worse. Over thousands of years and on countless planets, it's the best system anyone's ever come up with to ensure the strong don't dominate the weak. At least not for long.
If the Kaylons looked at these numbers, they would see a systemic collapse. They would see a species that claims to be advanced, but has allowed 0.1% of its population to hoard the life support resources of the other 90%. They wouldn't call us the land of the free. They would call us a suboptimal resource distribution colony. They would look at this and see a downward spiral. They would say,
"You have improved your machines, but you have perfected your enslavement. You are now so efficient that you don't even need to own a person. You just own their time and their debt. We decline."